During an ardent articulation of his show, Steve Harvey receives an abrupt affecting bulletin from Burkina Faso's Admiral Ibrahim Traore. The bulletin, abounding with respect, admiration, and raw affect, catches Harvey off guard, bringing him to tears on animate TV. This attenuate and able moment touches the hearts of millions as two affecting abstracts allotment a abysmal ad-lib affecting exchange. Steve Harvey absolved assimilate his allocution appearance date acid, his accepted a blaze smile. The admirers clapped and cheered, and Steve, abounding of energy, launched into the day's topic, the ability of purpose. It was declared to be an accustomed segment. He had aloof accomplished administration acclaimed adventure about his struggles growing up in abjection aback, a assembly a better absolved agilely against the stage, whispering article in Steve's ear. Steve looked confused, afresh surprised, afresh silent. He angry to the camera, austere his throat, and said, folks, I've aloof been told there's an actual appropriate bulletin for me, and it's advancing from about I never expected. Burkina Faso. The awning abaft him lit up with a aureate allowance and the adventurous words, message from Admiral Ibrahim Traore. The flat went absolutely quiet. Not a whisper, not a cough. Steve, now visibly shaken, looked into the camera and said softly, "Why would the Admiral of Burkina Faso appetite to accelerate me a message? I don't alike apperceive what this is about." He sat down, eyes bound on the screen, and afresh the video began. The video opened with a calm, balmy background, a simple board desk, a banderole of Burkina Faso abaft it. Afresh appeared a man, with able eyes and an affable voice, Admiral Ibrahim Traore. Steve leaned forward, his fingers abbreviating about the accoutrements of his chair. "Mr. Steve Harvey," the Admiral began in English with a bendable African accent. "I allege to you not aloof as a baton, but as a brother." The complete flat leaned in. "You don't apperceive me, but we apperceive you." Traore continued. "In the villages of Burkina Faso, your articulation alcove added than you may think. Your words of strength, faith, and additional affairs accept affected bodies you'll never meet." Steve blinked, stunned. His easily began to flutter slightly. Tro's articulation thickened with emotion. "During our darkest nights, a back war threatened our peace. Your adventure gave me hope. You reminded me that administration is not about titles, but about purpose and heart." The allowance fell into complete silence. A fresh Traore looked anon into the camera and said, "From a soldier who rose to advance his bodies to a boy who already had annihilation in America. I acknowledge you." Steve's aperture parted, but no words came out. Alone the alpha of tears. For the aboriginal time in a connected time, Steve Harvey was speechless. He accomplished for a tissue as the bulletin continued. "I've watched you cry for others, beam with strangers, accord to those who anticipation. They were forgotten." Traore's articulation echoed. "In my country, we apperceive that affectionate of heart. We alarm it a affection of the sun, warm, brave, and giving light." Steve assuredly whispered, "Wow." The Admiral paused, afresh continued. "This bulletin is not political, it is personal. I see in you the adventure of a man who never gave up, and it reminds me to never accord up on my people." The bulletin concluded with Traore adage article in more, the built-in accent of Burkina Faso. Steve angry to his team, his articulation cracking. What did he say at the end? A translator adjacent stood and replied gently. He said, "Even the arch. Man needs to be reminded that his articulation still matters." Steve covered his face. The army was crying, alike the cameraman's easily were shaking. This wasn't a loofa TV moment. It was a moment of soul's affair above oceans, above struggle, above brotherhood. And it had alone aloof begun. Steve sat quietly, his easily folded, his eyes glistening. The admirers waited, but he couldn't speak. Article abundant had affected his spirit. A weight of truth, of connection, of actuality seen. After a pause, Steve looked up and said, "You know, you never anticipate that your words go that far. You aloof try to be real. Try to survive. Try to help." The army clapped gently, but Steve aloft his duke to stop them. "This ain't about applause," he said. "This is about purpose." Backstage, the producers debated acid to a commercial. Steve refused. I appetite the apple to apprehend every additional of this. Don't stop the feed. Then, as the camera zoomed in, on Steve, an additional abruptness came, an animate connection. The awning flickered. Suddenly, Admiral Ibrahim Traore appeared on video, not pre-recorded this time. Steve gasped. Mr. Harvey, Traoré said, animated gently. For once, let me allege to you. Man to man, not from one country to another, from one dreamer to another. The flat fell bashful again. A storm of affect was rising, and no one was accessible for what the Admiral would say next. Traoré leaned in against the camera, his accent bendable and sincere. You see me now as a president, he said. But I was already a boy with no shoes. I absolved barefoot to school. I agitated books angry with string and abounding nights. I went to Betty by hungry. Steve bargained his head, his amateur abashed as he captivated aback tears. The Admiral continued. When I was a teenager, I saw war with my own eyes. I saw bodies accord up, but I additionally saw bodies rise. He paused. A fresh added article unexpected. One day in a awash internet cafe, I saw your video. Don't accord up. I didn't accept all your words, but I accepted your tears, your passion, your pain, and your hope. Steve looked up, stunned. You helped an adolescent boy in Burkina accept he could be added than his pain. And that boy became me. The army gasped. Some had tears falling freely. Trey smiled gently. So aback I heard your articulation afresh after most. Anniversary speaking about purpose, I knew it was time I said article back. Steve covered his face. And that's aback Traoré said article alike Steve couldn't believe. President Traoré took a abysmal breath. A fresh looked anon into the camera. Mr. Harvey, he said, you already said you basic to arrangement Africa, not aloof as a celebrity, but as a brother, as addition who wants to accord back. Steve nodded, whispering, yes, I did. Well, Traoré smiled. I appetite to allure you alone to Burkina Faso, not for cameras, not for attention, but to see what your articulation has congenital in silence. The flat admirers gasped. You've helped lift alcohol above oceans. Now let me appearance you the seeds you've active in our soil. Steve's easily trembled. He wasn't abiding whether to allege or cry. Afresh came the words that bankrupt him. There's a adolescent abode in Ouagadougou. The accouchement there apperceive your name. They adjure with your words. They beam with your jokes. But best of all, they believed they amount because you mattered. Steve stood up, eyes abounding of tears. The admirers rose with him, acclamation softly, abounding wiping their own eyes. But Trey wasn't finished. He looked into the lens and added, in 7 days they'll accumulate in the Apple Square, cat and mouse to accommodated the man whose words above oceans and healed hearts. The admission had begun. The actual abutting morning, Steve was already packing. No cameras, no media alert. Aloof him, a carry-on, and a affection abounding of questions. The Apple was buzzing. Every above-account aperture ran headlines. Admiral of Burkina Faso abashed Steve Harvey to tears. A bulletin that above oceans. But Steve wasn't activity for the world. He was activity for the kids, for that articulation that had announced to his soul. As his alike flew above the Atlantic, he stared out the window. His apperception wandered back to his childhood. Growing up poor in Cleveland, the nights they went hungry, the times his dreams seemed too big. And now he was aerial to Africa, alleged by an admiral who had already acquainted the aforementioned pain. He sighed to himself, God, why me? He didn't apperceive what to expect. Would the kids alike admit him? Would he be able abundant to face them? Meanwhile, in Burkina Faso, Admiral Traoré stood afore an army of accouchement in a brilliant courtyard. He smiled and said, he's coming. The kids screamed in joy, but one little babe in the abac had tears in her eyes. She captivated a baby notebook. Inside, she had accounting a letter to Steve Harvey. Her name was Aka. She was a lone 10, small, soft-spoken, and astute above her years. In her hand, the anthology befuddled hardly as she aside to her caretaker. Will he apprehend it? Will he care? The babysitter smiled, admiration beside her. He's already cared added than most. Acha's letter wasn't long, but it captivated. A apple of pain. Dear Mr. Steve, my name is Asha. My ancestor died 2 years ago. My astronomic is sick. Sometimes I cry at night, but one day Edition played your video. You said you were built in to do article great. I believed you. Acknowledge you for speaking to us alike if you didn't apperceive we were listening. I achievement you smile aback you see us. Your little sister Acha. As the sun set over Ouagadougou, accouchement accomplished songs, others fabricated assets with his name. Achievement abounding the air, but I aloof backward quiet, sitting abreast the mango tree, anthology afraid to her chest. In that moment, it wasn't about acclaim or politics. It was about a man who already slept in a car, a Farah adolescent who sometimes slept after dinner, and the sky seemed to whisper, they were meant to acquisition anniversary other. The alike affected bottomward on a aeronaceous aerodrome aloof. Afternoon. Steve Harvey stepped out, careful his eyes from the ablaze sun. No paparazzi, no admirable parade. Aloof a few guards, 2 translators, and a adolescent aid captivation a distinct sign. Welcome, Brother Steve, his baby faster. Centrally adjacent van, he was apprenticed through the streets. Simple homes, baby markets, accouchement bouncing, as he passed. Aback they accomplished the abode gates. He wasn't accessible for what he saw. Over 100 accouchement had gathered, captivation handmade signs that read, You matter. Acknowledge you, Mr. Steve. We adulation you. Tears abounding. His eyes. Admiral Traoré stepped forward, not in a suit, but in a simple white shirt and acceptable cloth. He hugged Steve tightly. Welcome home, he said. Steve couldn't speak. A fresh one-baby articulation alleged from the crowd. Steve! Steve! It was... Aha. She absolved up slowly, her anthology in her abashed hands. She accomplished out. This is for you, she whispered. He knelt, opened the letter, apprehend silently, and afresh he wept openly, uncontrollably, and every distinct actuality. There knew this wasn't aloof a visit. It was the all-powerful appointment. Backstage during a abbreviate bartering break, Steve sat motionless. The bulletin from Admiral Ibrahim Traore had aloof accomplished airing. An ambassador approached with a cardboard in hand, an English adaptation of the abounding message. Steve, you'll appetite to apprehend this part. It's not aloof about you, she whispered gently, handing it over. Steve's eyes scanned the words slowly. Aback I was an adolescent boy ambuscade beneath the board table of my grandmother's bazaar stall. I'd apprehend her beam as she listened to your articulation through a crackling radio. She didn't allege English, but your spirit fabricated her. Smile in the average of adamantine days. That articulation helped accession me. Steve covered his mouth. His articulation cracked. Oh my God. The camera was a back on, but Steve couldn't effect it a smile. He looked into the lens and whispered, This world, it's a bait than we think, and our words they biking added than we any time imagine. He wiped a breach as the admirers sat in abashed silence. Little did Steve know, this was aloof the alpha of article. Far greater. The articulation ended. Steve stepped off stage, still captivation the letter. He was declared to move on with the abutting guest, but Article Central him banned too. He absolved into his bathrobe room, buzz in hand. He alleged his producer. Get me a band to Ouagadougou. I appetite to allege to Admiral Traoré today. The ambassador stuttered, surprised. Yes, sir. I'll assignment on it now. 2 hours later, a defended Zoom articulation opened, and there he was. Admiral Ibrahim Traore, calm, humble, his eyes agitated the weight of a nation and the amore of a brother. Steve looked at him, articulation trembling. Mr. President, I'm a loofah actor from Cleveland. I never absurd my articulation would ability. Addition like you. Traoré smiled gently, and I'm a loofah soldier who loves his people. But alike soldiers charge hope. You gave me that. Now I appetite to accord article back. Steve leaned in. What do you mean? Traoré said softly. Appear to Burkina Faso. Aloof for one day. There's addition I appetite you to meet. Steve froze. He had no abstraction this one book would change his activity forever. Steve almost slept that night. The president's allurement played on echo in his mind. But there was one book from the letter that apparitional him most. That articulation helped accession me. He anticipation about his own mother, the one who fabricated him except he could become something. Steve remembered article else too. Years ago, during an asperous moment in his career, he had prayed, God, if I any time get famous, let my words beggarly article to edition who absolutely needs them. And now this. That night, Steve went back on air for an abrupt animate stream, not with jokes or monologues, but with an accuracy he couldn't authority in. He captivated up the translated letter and looked into the camera. Y'all, I've been adored. With fame, money, success. But this bulletin from a baton, I never met. This letter from a boy aloft by a grandmother who couldn't accept me but acquainted me. That's God. He paused. I gave a affiance already, and I'm befitting it. Steve fabricated. Accommodation appropriate there. He was activity to Burkina Faso. Not for TV, not for ratings, but for article far added important. Steve boarded the clandestine flight to Ouagadougou with the abundant affection and an accessible mind. It was his aboriginal time visiting Burkina Faso. He didn't accompany cameras, no press, aloof his assistant, a translator, and a distinct account he hadn't accounting in for years. As the alike took off, Steve sat by the window, captivation, the translated letter in his easily again. He had accent one band in red ink. I ambition my mother could accept a parent the man you helped me become. It echoed in his apperception like a song. He leaned back and aside to himself. What did I do to deserve this honor? Mid-flight, his abettor handed him a baby envelope with a wax seal. It was from Admiral Traoré. Central was a handwritten note. When you land, don't anticipate like a celebrity. Anticipate like a son advancing home. Steve apprenticed the letter to his chest. He didn't apperceive what accessible him on the added side. But abysmal down, he acquainted this cruise wasn't aloof about one man's gratitude. It was about healing. Article active in both of them. Article the cameras had never seen. Steve accustomed in Burkina Faso aloof as the sun began to rise. The airport was quiet. No crowds, no reporters, aloof a company of 2 Atramentis SUVs, and 1 Alpine soldier continuing abreast the door, Admiral Ibrahim Traore himself. Steve stepped bottomward the stairs slowly, borderline of what to say. But Traoré absolved up and did article unexpected. He accepted him like a brother. No words, aloof a long, bashful hug. Steve's eyes watered. You came, Traoré said simply. I had to, Steve replied. They collection in blackout through the arenaceous streets. A couchment coiled from the roadside. Some captivated hand-drawn signs with Steve's name. But they're aboriginal. Stop wasn't the palace. It was a baby asperus market. Rows of board tables covered with fruits, spices, and clothes. Traoré led Steve to the actual back. This, he said, pointing to a burst arrest, was my grandmother's. Appropriate actuality is area I accept to you on the radio while allowance her. Calculation coins. Steve looked bottomward at the dirt, speechless. The Admiral knelt, best up a baby rock, and placed it in Steve's palm. This is area achievement began. Steve couldn't authority it anymore. He cried silently, and so did Traoré. Traoré guided Steve to a apprehensive apple an hour al fresco the capital. As the car formed to a stop, a accumulation of women waited beneath a tree. One of them, aged and slow-moving, stepped forward. Her easily trembled slightly. This is Awa, Traoré said. She's the alone one still animate who acclimated to sit with my grandmother during bazaar days. She remembers you. Steve looked confused. But how? Traoré smiled. They didn't accept your English, but they acquainted your joy. Awa acclimated to. Say, that man has a affection that speaks louder than his tongue. Awa stepped closer. The translator acclaimed afresh her words. You fabricated the adamantine canicule feel lighter. My sister, his grandmother, acclimated to say, Your articulation gave her adventuresomeness to accumulate affairs a bakshi basic to accord up. Steve knelt, tears falling again. Awa placed her duke on his audacity and a side article bendable in Mujhay. The translator afraid as she translated. She said, "My sister would accept fed you if she had met you. She would accept alleged you, her son." In that moment, Steve Harvey wasn't a celebrity. He was a son actuality accustomed home by a mother he never knew he had. And the apple watched, speechless. That evening, Steve was arrived to a baby academy area accouchement waited to accomplish article special. No cameras, no lights, aloof bendable drums, and afraid little faces. As Steve entered, the kids began singing a simple tune in Mujhay, the bounded language. The translator leaned in and whispered, "It's a song Admiral Traoré's grandmother acclimated to hum while affable at her bazaar stall. Now these accouchement sing it in her honor." Steve froze. The aforementioned tune he'd hummed canicule beforehand after a live Y, tears abounding his eyes. "I bethink this," Steve whispered. "My grandma in Cleveland." She acclimated to hum article. "Like this aback I cried." Trey stood beside him, accoutrements above gently. "Our grandmothers, they gave us the aforementioned comfort. Bags of afar apart." Steve sat bottomward on the arenaceous bench amidst by children. One babe handed him a bored abstraction of two easily captivation a heart. He bankrupt openly, loudly, years of pain, years of questions, all appear in a abode he never expected. The boy from Ohio and the boy from Ouagadougou, now two men, had begun a band that no calligraphy could write. The apple didn't see celebrities anymore. Alone, two sons missing their grandmothers. Afore Steve's acknowledgement flight, Admiral Traoré asked to accommodated one aftermost time, this time at a baby artifice of acreage aloof al fresco the capital. It was quiet. A timberline stood in the centermost amidst by sunflowers. Traoré handed Steve a rolled-up affidavit angry with a red ribbon. "This land," he said, "now belongs to you. It's a abode of peace, a allowance from Burkina Faso. So whenever you feel annoyed or lost, you accept a home here." Steve befuddled his arch slowly, overwhelmed. "I didn't appear for a gift. I came because your letter fabricated me feel animal again." Trey nodded. "And you fabricated my bodies feel seen. That is account added than gold." They stood silently beneath the tree, the wind abrasion their faces. A fresh Traoré did article no one expected. He knelt and placed his duke over Steve's chest. "I don't kneel for many," he said, "but I kneel for hearts that change lives." Steve fell to his knees too. And together, two able men cried like little boys who absent their grandmothers and begin anniversary added in the pain. The abutting day, Steve's acknowledgement to the U.S. was met with silence. He asked for no fanfare, no cameras, no show. But article had changed. On his abutting broadcast afore starting the show, Steve absolved on date captivation, the bored abstraction the accouchement gave him, the one with the two easily captivation a heart. He placed it a claim on his desk. Afresh. He looked into the camera. "In my life, I've accustomed abounding awards, abounding gifts, but none like this." His articulation cracked. "I met a man, a president, not aloof of a country, but of the animal heart. Ibrahim Traore reminded me of article I forgot. That love, honor, and anamnesis are stronger than annihilation a claim can accord you." He paused. "He alleged me a son of Africa. I alarm him my brother." And a fresh Steve did article rare. He played the children's song live. No translation, aloof, authentic, innocent voices. Millions watched, millions cried. Comments abounding in from every bend of the world. Bodies didn't. See politics. They saw love. They saw legacy. They saw healing. Dear viewers, if this adventure affected your heart, like aloof a little, amuse like this video, subscribe to the channel, an animate version beneath one word, healed. Let's advance this activity to the accomplished world. One story, one tear, one affection at a time.